Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping right in to tackle one of the biggest questions of our time. Why is the relationship between the US and China so incredibly tense? We're going to look at a fascinating analysis that argues the answer has nothing to do with the usual political headlines, but everything to do with economics.
I mean, it feels like just yesterday the story was all about cooperation and partnership. Now it's all antagonism, sanctions, and constant talk of a new Cold War. So what gives? What really changed? The analysis we're exploring today argues the answer has been hiding in plain sight this whole time.
Yeah, that's the core puzzle, isn't it? That sharp turn. The source article really zeroes in on this one question. After decades of working together, why the sudden intense hostility, especially coming from the US?
Okay, let's really dig into this. The authors, Jason Hickel and Dylan Sullivan, they put forward a pretty provocative idea. They say, forget all the political talk. This conflict is being driven by the fundamental mechanics of capitalism. At the end of the day, it's a story about profits, labor, and who really benefits.
So the first pillar of their argument is this. The entire foundation of that old cooperative relationship has completely crumbled. And what was that foundation built on, you ask? Well, they claim it was all about one thing: cheap Chinese labor.
To really get what they're saying, we have to understand this key concept they use called unequal exchange. It sounds a little academic, but the idea is actually pretty simple. It's that wealthy core nations get a huge economic advantage by paying super low wages for labor in periphery nations. And the authors argue that for decades, China was the absolute center of this system, providing this massive, skilled, and incredibly low-cost workforce.
And wow, just look at this chart. This tells you pretty much the whole story in just 3 bars. Back around 2005, manufacturing labor in China cost less than $1 an hour. Think about that. Even less than India at the time. Fast forward to today, it's over $8 an hour, while India is still hanging around $2. This isn't just a small bump. We're talking about a historic, seismic shift that completely changes the economic math for Western companies.
And get this. This quote about the iPad really puts the scale of this into perspective. It's absolutely wild. An extra $572 in costs per iPad. If those workers were just paid at US rates, according to the authors, this shows the massive amount of value Western companies were able to capture. And so the end of that low-wage era? Well, they say it represents a fundamental threat to those profits.
So, if the first economic pillar to crumble was cheap labor, the second one is all about technology, and more specifically, who's in control of it.
The article describes what it calls the imperial arrangement. And the idea here is that core states maintain their economic dominance by holding a monopoly on all the essential tech, things like advanced computing, aircraft, and new medicines. This forces other nations into dependency, where they have to trade their cheap resources just to get access to the vital technology they need.
But look at this list. China is now systematically dismantling that monopoly. We're not talking about small steps here. We're talking about the world's largest high-speed rail network, becoming leaders in renewable energy and EVs, making their own commercial jets. The list just goes on and on. The article calls this level of technological progress unprecedented for a country at its income level.
And here's why that matters so much on a global scale, according to the article. China's tech boom isn't just about its own success. It threatens to shatter that entire imperial arrangement because it gives the global south a choice. It gives them an alternative, affordable supplier for the tech they need. They don't have to go to the West anymore.
Okay, so you're probably thinking, if this is all about economics, about wages and technology, what about all the headlines? What about the constant drumbeat of a growing military threat from China?
Well, the authors don't mince words on this. They argue that claims of China posing a military threat are, and I'm quoting directly here, pure propaganda. They insist that if you just look at the material facts, they paint a completely different picture.
And this slide lays out the data they use. Let's just walk through it. Per person, they state U.S. military spending is 10 times the global average, while China's is actually below average. Nuclear weapons? The ratio is about 8-to-1 in favor of the U.S. And in terms of global presence, the U.S. has hundreds of foreign military bases, many right near China's border, while China has exactly one in Djibouti.
And this number really drives their point home. 7 times. According to the source, that's how much the US and its military allies outspend China. For the authors, this stark imbalance makes it pretty hard to frame China as the primary military aggressor, and suggests that narrative must be serving some other purpose.
Okay, so let's bring this all together. What's the final conclusion of this economic analysis? What is the real reason for the tension, according to this article?
It really boils down to this simple 3-step logic.
First, Western economic power for a long time was supercharged by cheap Chinese labor and a monopoly on high-tech goods. Second, China's own development, with its rising wages and incredible tech progress, is breaking that whole system. And therefore, the conclusion, step 3, is that the hostility we're seeing is a direct reaction by the West to try and protect an economic order that has been so incredibly beneficial for its own capital accumulation.
And so the article leaves us with this final, really provocative thought. It completely reframes the US-China relationship. It's not a clash of ideologies or some looming military showdown. Instead, it's a fierce economic struggle over the future of the entire global system. And if this analysis is correct, the question isn't just about geopolitics, it's about the very structure of the world economy we're all living in.